Aloha and welcome to Coffee Without Milk, a podcast presented by Maui Institute for Modern Music and Ebb and Flow Arts. More information about upcoming concerts, events, and educational opportunities can be found at www.ebbandflowarts.org.
Are we ready, Loli? Yeah, let's take it off. Let's take her off. What does that mean, take it off? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another podcast. Hello. This is Loli Frog, Dr. Friedrich, and we are often used in the education programs, but for the podcast, we decided to do this sort of thing before the show starts. And we are very, very, very lucky to have with us the wonderful pianist Naomi Niskala from all the way in Pennsylvania, where she lives in her new home and teaches at Susquehanna College. Yes, it's a great honor for us, indeed, Loli. And why don't we say how we actually, Loli, I have a very interesting story to tell you. There were, in the Cold War, there was an East German citizen who was convicted and sent to Siberia. Oh, no. Yes, and he said to his friends, well, I will write to you, but, you know, because of the censorship there, when it's a truth, it will be in red ink, and when it's falsehoods, it will be in blue ink. Aha. So they translated, and sure enough, they got a letter, and it was all in blue ink. Aha. So he says in the letter, gentlemen, things are wonderful here in Siberia. There's a plentiful supply of all foods. People are having wonderful time. They go to the theater and they laugh, and the streets are full and bustling. But the only thing I cannot acquire is red ink. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Got it. Yes, Loli. So that's the story. And we're hoping today that Naomi will communicate to us with the red ink. So she will tell us everything that's really happening in her world. Yes. And also, Loli, remember, coffee without milk. Uh-huh. May I have a cup of coffee without cream, please? I'm sorry, we don't have cream. Would you prefer coffee without milk? Very funny, Loli. What does that all mean? Well, it means that, you know, during the stay at home, we have to have, we have to do without things that maybe we wouldn't want anyway, but since we can't have them, it's a frustrating, indeed, Loli. It's been going on for months. This is not a joke anymore. Indeed. You know, what I would really like, though, is coffee without almond milk. Almond milk? You want it? I would love that, Loli. Almond milk. Well, maybe we can make an exception, Doctor. Oh, that would be great, Loli. Thank you so much, Loli. No! Not on me, you idiot. Well, anyway, let's get on with this show. I must shower.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Loli. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Good morning. I guess it's morning here. Welcome to Coffee Without Milk. Today, we welcome a very, very special guest, an incredible musician and performer, Naomi Niskala. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hope you're doing very well over there. Can't wait to learn all about what you're doing, listen to all about what you're doing, and enjoy a lot of great music this morning. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Yes, Naomi was with us in some of our last programs.
As recently as, was it November of 2019?
Yes, two
concerts, one in the Keavalai Church and another in the Atherton Performing Arts Studio. Now, that second one was recorded for eventual broadcast, and Hawaii Public Radio has begun to broadcast actually a total of 3 concerts they recorded. So we'll look forward to that. Work on the recordings at HPR has halted for the time being, in that they're doing their fundraising drive right now. So, but it may resume as early as next month. So we'll look forward to that. That was a wonderful recital. And Naomi, you are doing amazing work, but let's talk about what really got our association started, and that was by way of a third party, that is the composer and pianist Robert Helps. And to me, what Naomi did was truly heroic, in that she recorded the complete piano music of Robert Helps in 2 CDs. This is on is it the Naxos label?
It's on the Albany label.
Albany label. And these are wonderful performances. And the most amazing part of it for me is that, Naomi, and you can speak to this, that you never actually met Robert Helps. So to me, it's a story of not only great dedication, but of something that transcends what normally happens. That is, in modern music, it's a small circle relatively, and when one performance happens, it triggers another one, and there's a certain scratching one another's back, and reciprocity goes on. And there was a story years ago when I was in the New York Guild of Composers. There was a time that Mario Davidovsky, the late composer, was kind of leading the meetings, and he would rail against reciprocity. He didn't like that. He didn't like his music to be done because he had done someone else a favor and in exchange and so on. And he spoke to the career of the late Charles Warrenan, who he said, I can trace Charles Warrenen's itinerary by the programs he presents in New York in his group for contemporary music concerts. In other words, the composers on the programs in New York were the composers were all on faculty or somewhere else in the country, where sure enough, Warrenen would visit and, receive accolades for his work, et cetera, et cetera. So there was that aspect, but it's almost unheard of in some ways, Naomi, that you would have done this. Please tell us again, because we know the story, but tell our listeners and viewers how this project came about, and your philosophy about complete works of composers. You had talked about this as well.
Okay. Sure. I had taken a job at the University of South Florida, which is in Tampa. And I got there, and I, was given an office, and I had never heard of Robert Helps, either as a pianist or as a composer. And I think it was soon, maybe a semester or maybe not even that I had gotten there, and some people on the faculty were telling me about him as a person, because he had, I think I got down there in 2004, I want to say. So it wasn't soon after he had passed away. So the people working there had obviously, had been working with him. They were telling me about him, not so much as a composer, but as a colleague, as a person, as a piano teacher, and as a pianist. And I actually had his office. And also sometimes when you go, to start a new job, and if it's at a Research One institution, they give you this startup fund, right? And so the most logical thing for a musician to do is to go use the startup fund to record a CD and try and get it published. And so originally I was going to do, a new music CD with various composers on it. And then after contacting, a couple of CD companies, they said, well, that doesn't sell well. Where do you put it on? This is when you would still put them on the racks, like in stores, right? So they said you should really center in on one composer. And so I started listening a bit to some of Robert Help's works, often with him playing. So people had lent me tapes and recordings and so on. And so I thought, okay, I'll record a CD of his music. And after he had passed away, they basically emptied his office and as well as his condo in Florida. And apparently he had a lot of stuff in his car too. So they took all of those things, papers, scores, anything, and they just basically dumped them in boxes and took them over to the library where they had sat. And there were some 60, 70, I think 76 large boxes of just papers and tapes and notebooks and scores and letters and all this stuff. And so I started to go through there to try and pick out some of the scores. And once I had done that, I was looking at them and realized that there was too much piano music to fit on a CD. And I think for me, it was more out of, I'm always not, I'm indecisive, but maybe it was also a little bit of laziness. I didn't know how to pick and choose. So I thought it's actually easier for me to learn it all. And it ended up fitting when I did the math. It looked like it would fit on two CDs, and it just barely fit on two CDs, which was great. And yeah, even though I didn't know him, I never got the chance to meet him. He wrote so much, and he wrote so beautifully about his own pieces, about his own experiences, about his lessons, about his teachings, about other composers, other pieces, students that he met. And all of that stuff was in these boxes. So I got to kind of sift through letters and his own writings and musings about his own pieces and other people's pieces. That, for instance, the Chopin etudes he played a lot, and Fauré, and kind of the unknown, more the lesser known composers of piano music, often late Romantic, early or Impressionist composers. So I felt like I got to know him quite well without ever having met him. And it's funny because everybody always assumes I knew him, and I didn't. So yeah,
that is so unusual. It's there's a purity about that dedication that's so commendable, so rare, and we're all benefiting. Now, the connection for me as a former student of Robert Help's many years ago is that we started Ebb and Flow Arts in 1999, and one of the first projects was to invite him here to perform. He taught half of the year in San Francisco, as you say, and so he gave two recitals, one at the old Seabury Hall and another at Atherton Performing Arts Studio in Honolulu. That performance was eventually broadcast. He performed a work that probably, maybe it's his most extended single movement solo piece, and also maybe the one he had most recently completed at that time, which is called Shall We Dance? And when Naomi first was talking about giving recitals here, she suggested that work, and I had a funny feeling about it. Just personally, it's not been the best luck for me to perform a work twice in the same venue. Just superstition, but also the feeling, well, that piece, that's what Robert Help's played here, and live, and with maybe not the most accurate, let's say, performance. He complained while he was here about his own piece, saying it's so darn hard, but he played it wonderfully, and so we thought, well, let's try other pieces. And sure enough, when you did your recitals here last November, about a year ago, you did not include those works, but ones that we will hear today and others. But also, why don't we listen now to your performance of "Shall We Dance," so that we could make up for that? And it's again, it's interesting to compare durations. Your performance takes about a minute less than Robert Help's in a recording he made, and so on. But it might be a good way to start, because it really connects the dots, so to speak, of how we all got in touch, and our, say, mutual dedication to the work of this composer and pianist. Peter, do you have that one queued up?
Yeah. Excuse me. I haven't spoken for a few minutes. Yeah, Shall We Dance?
For a few months.
Yeah. Feels like years at this point. It's all a blur. Let's listen to Shall We Dance. And did you want to talk about the recording that I have a little bit more from the first volume of Robert Help's piano music, Naomi? Anything particular that went into this, the process of practicing, rehearsing, digesting the score?
I don't know. It was just a lot of time with the one composer's work. But I think one of the things that was really refreshing about doing these, and I recorded them pretty much back to back. There might have been a few months in between the first and second volume. Was that his music is so varied, and I think that might be one of the reasons why people don't really know him, because you can't pigeonhole him into one type or even two styles. So even though I was basically learning about 2 hours of just one person's works over probably a year and a half, it never felt boring, because each piece was very different. And I think this is one of my favorite ones. It is his longest piece. I think he wrote it in 94. I'm not surprised that his is longer. I think what's really amazing about Helps's playing is his ability to play slow and really pull those long lines out. And take the time. His playing, I find, is extremely expressive, kind of in a romantic style, in romantic period way. And I think that's what I really enjoy too with his pieces. And that's what, when people, especially people who are not into new music, they listen to his pieces, even the ones that are more atonal, and they can really hear that expressive line. And I think that also draws people in. And he was so wonderful at doing that and really pulling these lines out. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's very insightful. Have you heard him perform this work, or is this just from, okay.
I have. There were many recordings, and interestingly, I remember going through these boxes, coming across these cassettes from Hawaii, and I thought, how the heck did he end up in Hawaii? What's this connection? And I always thought this was back in like early 2000s, and I did not find the answer out until 2016, because I was on sabbatical, and I went to Hawaii for about 10 days. And before going, a clarinet colleague of mine, Scott Anderson, right? I know him.
Yeah, we know Scott.
Yeah, so I know him from teaching. We used to teach at Interlochen together. And I had been in Minnesota slightly before coming to Hawaii on sabbatical. And I was talking to him about it. And he said, Robert Help's name sounds really familiar. And he says, wait a sec. And that's what, then he put Robert Help's and you, Robert, together. And he gave me your contact information. And then it clicked me. That's how, Robert Help ended up in Hawaii. And then I contacted you when I was on sabbatical. And a few years later, I ended up coming to play for you guys. Yeah.
Well, that's a great circle there. So this recording from the Complete Works for Piano Volume 1, sorry, will you say again when you recorded that, about what year?
Boy, I want to say 2006, I think.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So
Yeah, it's about 14 years. It's time's flown past.
the time has, it sure has,
Yeah.
more than ever lately. Great. Well, without any further ado, let's take a listen to Shall We Dance from the Robert Helps Complete Works for Piano Volume 1.
It's interesting, Naomi. Is a beautiful rendition.
Thanks.
And
may I ask a question, Robert?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Listening to it, it does carry so much of the impressionistic style, and I wonder, kind of personally, what it reminds you of, and where it brings you when you're rehearsing and when you're listening to it again. What does it recall to mind for you?
Is that to Naomi?
Sorry, that's for Naomi. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh, boy, I don't really ever listen to my own playing. So, I probably have not played these CDs much at all in the last 15 years. Sometimes I hear them, if anything pops up in the radio, it's always the homage because they're the most tonal, and occasionally this one. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of takes me back to 15 years ago and recording it. Yeah, I mean, I think it also, maybe because I haven't listened to it much, but it also feels really it kind of new to listen to it again. But yeah, I mean, I don't really listen to myself playing much. So.
The piece has a feeling, it has a nostalgic sense to it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm glad that
yes.
It's been discovered, recorded, and presented for us today. And sorry, Robert, what were you going to ask?
Let's see. Naomi, you mentioned helps projecting the long lines within whatever piece, but particularly his own. And that's a term that's often associated with his composition teacher, Roger Sessions. Sessions was known for the long line. That is these beautiful melodies that seem to just keep unfolding and then unfolding within unfolding, and just mesmerizing structures. And Robert Helps used to say that he learned more about performance from his composition teacher and more about composition from his piano teacher, who was Abby Whiteside, where Whiteside would emphasize this sort of hierarchy of weight, that is, the levers of the body would govern larger time spans. So the shoulder down is connected to the forearm is connected to the wrist and the fingers, and oftentimes the composition of his pieces are very notable for that. Even something as fantastically difficult as, let's listen maybe next to the third etude for left hand alone. It's really constantly all in a way, or often alternating between a kind of an eighth note pulse within which they're the 16th note. So there's it falls into the Whiteside philosophy or approach of leveraging different parts of the arm and shoulder to govern larger and larger time spans or smaller and smaller time spans. Not that you, Naomi, are a devotee or were studied Whiteside, but there's a lot in your playing that no doubt would have pleased very much Robert Helps in the way you do leverage these passages to great effect. So, shall we dance? No.
I was about to say that. Well, I mean, from the point of view of your performance, Naomi, from what Robert was speaking of there, it seems to be drawing the energy and using the body as a series of mechanical levers. How do you express when you're playing? Where do you feel like you're drawing the energy, and how do you control the movements of your body? What do you practice in that way?
Well, I think, I was able to meet Abby Whiteside. I went up to her apartment. I don't know, maybe 2009, somewhere around there. And I did meet with her and just kind of talk with her. And my own, from my own teacher, and I think the most important teacher that I've had, especially in terms of technique, but also musicality, was a woman named Maria Luisa Faini, who had retired from Eastman, I think in the late 70s, early 80s. And I'd grown up in Rochester, New York, and I was fortunate to go take lessons with her at her home after she retired for about 3 or 4 years. And she became absolutely instrumental in the way I play. And I think many of her teachings are very, very similar to Abby Whiteside. She's coming at it from a different angle, but she completely revamped and developed my technique. And being an Italian, everything was about sound and melody. And so for her, sound production, never using muscle, but using weight. And this idea, which I think Abby Whiteside talks about as well, everybody thinks piano playing has to do with fingers, and it's not. Certainly you need to have, independent fingers, you need to have that dexterity, but it all really centers on everything from your hand up to your shoulders, into your back, into your entire body. And, I always tell my students that thankfully, I think piano is really one of the most natural instruments to play. We don't pluck a string, we press a key down, and gravity's in our favor, right? So really, if you're a good pianist and you're playing correctly, one, you should be able to create a really rich and warm sound. It should never sound hard or harsh. And you should be able to sit and play for 10, 12 hours a day and not become injured, because you should be using your weight and you're dropping it in the keys and you're letting gravity do the work. So the only work you're doing is to move left and right in the keys and occasionally pick your fingers or your hands up. And so I think that definitely helps the sound. It also helps you carry a line, because when you're trying to carry a line at the piano, we don't play a legato, because the definition of legato is you connect one note from the next. So therefore, if you talk to any, singer or string player, woodwind or brass, they can crescendo on a note and connect to the next. For a piano, we're percussion. Our note dies. So what we're trying to do is when we create a legato, we're faking it, really. And we're making sure that the next note that comes in doesn't have a sharp attack, really. And the only way to do that is to transfer your weight from note to note. And you get a beautiful legato, you get a beautiful tone. And so therefore, too, you have the ability to carry something out and feel a big pulse without feeling the kind of the up and down vertical playing of piano. So I think, the teacher that I had, Ms. Faini, was really instrumental in creating a way of playing technically, but also musically. And I remember one year I moved overseas when I was 13 to Tokyo, and she happened to move back to Rome, outside of Rome the same year. And so I would visit her every year for about a week. And I remember one year she just got, and I would live with her for a week. And so I'd have about 8 or 9 hours of lessons, basically. She had a small condo, I'd practice, and she'd go around the corner. And if I did anything stupid when I was practicing, she'd come screaming and correct me. And then one time I went early in one of the visits, and I can't remember what I was playing. And she just said, you cannot shape a melody. You don't know how to shape a melody. And she put on Fischer Dieskau recordings for the rest of the week on Schubert and Schumann, and you have to listen to how he's shaping, listen to how he holds that tune out, listen what he does. And we spent the entire week doing that. So
listening to his voice and the way that he would connect the melody, and you were being informed by that. That's incredible. Yeah. Which you're right. You make it sound as though piano practice should be more like Tai Chi.
Yeah. And it's all listening, so many people think it's this. Yeah, it is. But you have to listen, and you have to feel as comfortable as possible. Now, the left hand etudes, Robert, I I never got to the point of being comfortable with them. And I don't know if you can, if anybody could, but unless it's something like that, I really think you have to find a way to play something where you're absolutely at ease and your muscles are relaxed and you can listen to what you're doing.
Should we listen to the third movement, Allegro Brillante, or should we hear?
Yeah.
They're not particularly long, are they? Let me see here. We may just want to include all three. It's about a 10-minute total runtime for all three.
Just realize that this is one hand playing.
It's only one hand?
Yeah, just left hand.
And the first is Andante con moto.
Yeah.
So let's take a listen to between us, we'll just listen to a bit of the Allegro Brillante. Do you want me to include all three, Robert, or should we just stick to the third one?
Well, that would be good. How do you feel, Naomi?
It's up to you. I don't know what you typically do and how much music you include. So whatever makes sense.
As much as possible.
Yeah. So, but we'll insert appropriately anyway.
Yeah, I'd like to take a listen to just the third movement since you called attention to that, Robert. Then
sure.
If we want to decide later to include all three or just the one, that's fine too, depending on our overall time. So
right.
Let me just go ahead and I'm going to put it on our screen so we can just have a moment to enjoy that, and then we'll come back. So I'm sorry, I'll have to explain. Your right hand is doing nothing. That's entirely left hand?
Well, the right hand is desperately holding on the edge of the piano.
I was going to say, it must be grabbing on tight to something there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Naomi, how would you say that this project has affected you as a pianist, as a musician, with any other projects that you subsequently tackled?
Well, I think it's obviously opened doors to meeting other people, such as you. But I think also a way that it shaped me that I didn't ever think this would happen. So Robert Helps, I think, was really, if he wasn't playing new music, it was romantic. It's late romantic. I remember reading somewhere he said, "Yeah, when I was younger, I had to play the Mozart and the things like that." And from what I could tell from his concert programs, he didn't play anything classical or Baroque. And for me, I've always been drawn to Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert. Having Maria Faini as an initial teacher, but after that, I think the other two teachers that were most influential for me were Gilbert Kalish at Stony Brook, and then also Claude Frank at Yale. And Mr. Frank being of the German and structure and form, and it's a more intellectual look at music, but still very musical. And that's always been so important to me, and that's I think what draws me to Beethoven and Schubert in particular, especially when Schubert does the 5 and 7 bar phrases and so on. So for me, that's where I'm most comfortable when I'm playing tonal music, the Mozart, Beethoven, and Schubert. And so delving into Helps and having to really put on this romantic period hat, which I'm not as comfortable with. I mean, if I don't have to play Liszt at all for my life, I'm totally fine with that. I could completely do without Liszt or Rachmaninoff for that matter. But to have to put on that hat to understand his music and to really stretch. I mean, there's so many of his pieces have rubato, right, written in the title. In the tempo, throughout the piece, or he writes about it saying, I know I have this tempo, but really the piano should be free and use as much rubato and time. And I would listen to his recordings and go, oh my goodness, he took so much time there. And I would have never thought to take time. And so that really changed my approach, to his music, but when I would come back to the traditional music, that's romantic. And so that was something that I never would have thought when I started this project. So that's a little, different. But yeah, it's really opened the world up to, meeting you and Ebb and Flow, meeting Spectrum Concerts in Berlin. And I still occasionally get emails from people who stumble across his works, or they know of him and hear the CD and realize that there's some works that are not published, and they contact me to see about getting the scores or manuscripts and so on. So, and that's always wonderful to hear from people who find his music and are interested in and want to learn more about it.
You mentioned that during the pandemic and shutdown, there seems to be more of an interest, that you're getting an unusual amount of inquiries about this music.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I had a couple of people contact me. One asking about the song transcriptions, right? Which only one I think is published, and the other three are not. And then somebody else who was also interested in his music. So yeah, I don't know if that's coincidence or people just have more in their time, more time now, or you can't do certain things, or you're inside and you're listening. I don't know, but
yeah. So you've moved into a new home. Congratulations.
Well, I just started to move. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a process.
The main thing is your piano is there now. Mm-hmm. And but in your old home, you were recently having some living room concerts, you might say. How's that working out? What do you have? Spatially distanced audience, a few people, mask wearing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the place I was living until just recently. It was a rental house, and the living room was at the front of the house, and there were three big windows and then the front door, and it was a small room. So one of the things, I have a piano trio, and we had all these great ideas for projects, and we had blocked off these huge rehearsal chunks that we were going to do from basically mid-May until late August, and then COVID hit and everything got turned upside down, and we decided that we would still do as much rehearsal as possible, but we made sure that all of us completely isolated for 2 weeks before. Okay, so we then had to find, and our violinist is in several groups, and he was doing that with other groups, so then it ended up we could only do 2 rehearsal periods between mid-May and late August, where each of us could safely just completely isolate for 2 weeks and not go out. And so then we felt it would be safer because, we'd be rehearsing 8-9 hours a day and staying together and eating together. So we did a period, I think, in late May and another period in August. And we were trying to get some stuff together just to record some demos and to we were to rehearse for concerts that we were supposed to do, which of course got all canceled. And I knew that some of the people in the area just wanted something to do. So we ended up finding 2 days where we just opened all the windows, opened the front door, and told people to show up with a blanket or a chair, bring a bottle of wine or whatever you want, an umbrella if it's really sunny, and just distance in the front yard and wear a mask. And so we did that twice, and it was quite enjoyable. And some of them I think we also recorded and we streamed later for other folks who couldn't be there.
About how many people would attend?
I don't know. We had maybe, just like 15 or 20 people. Anyway, we also told people, look, you come and go. It's outside. If you can't be available the whole time, we're starting at 7:30. It'll probably go an hour and a half. Stop in when you can. And I don't, and then we also, I think we broadcast to some retirement homes in California, and things like that. So that would have normally had us on their concert series. So.
Broadcast these living room performances live?
Yeah, well, we ended up the internet in the house there was not quite probably strong enough to do a live stream, so we recorded them, and then we went to campus where the internet was better, and we streamed to them, and then we offered them like a Q&A afterwards, so then they could zoom in and talk to us afterwards and ask us questions about the program or how we were, what we were doing in COVID and things. So it was, wasn't quite being there in person, but there was still a little bit of connection and contact that we were able to do.
So important in a time like we've been experiencing to stay connected. I mean, especially to other musicians, but to an audience. That's something we talk a lot about on the show, is how to connect with audiences throughout the whole last 7 months and then continuing forward. And hosting something, I imagine, a lot easier in the summertime than into the season we're coming into now. So it's really wonderful that you were creative enough and bold enough to just put it together. Say, hey, if you're going to drink wine, don't drink it at home. Come drink it in our yard and we'll play for you.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, it's trying to find what you can do now, and then I just find that I'm so much more busy balancing so many different things. Throwing this house purchase and move in certainly didn't help. So it's trying to balance that, and it's not been easy,
Yeah.
Yeah. In the meantime, trying to not stay in your head too much about everything too, having something to focus on, something to help propel you forward and motivate, creative pursuits, as well as, staying on top of your technical game and being able to practice as much as you can.
And I think for me is teaching here at a university, I've always been thankful to have the job, but especially now because all of the performing is really, it's vanished, it's gone, Yeah. And so at least having the ability to come in, and we are pretty much in person here. So seeing my students, they flip-flop back and forth each week between a Zoom lesson and an in-person lesson, teaching my courses where most of the students are in a very, very large classroom. And then, I have a young daughter who I'm keeping home. She's distance learning. So, and she's too young to learn on her own. So I spend 4 4 hours a day in the morning before I come to the university teaching her. So that's, it gives me some purpose. And I think of, my friends who are predominantly their income is from performing, and not only the loss of income, but just the loss of they can't do what they normally spend all of their time on.
Mm. So adding up, it sounds like about 30 hours a day you're working.
It does.
Yeah, and the reality is, well, the sleep goes and the practice time goes. So, I mean, I guess in one way, it's a good thing I don't have a concert around the corner, because, I mean, the amount of practice is, it's just, you can't be, a mother to a young kid and trying to teach at the college, and some of these college kids are having a really tough time. So there's more time spent with them, and then, trying to do my own stuff, which, so.
One of our composers, sorry, go ahead, Robert.
Go ahead. Is Susquehanna University, is that correct? And in Western Pennsylvania.
It's
Central Pennsylvania. Yeah, okay. They have successfully put off the virus with a system of detection by way of the effluents.
I was really, I think all of us here are extremely impressed by the measures that the university took. I mean, they were from the beginning extremely proactive, thinking outside of the box, thinking ahead, trying to think about what things could happen and would happen. And so, we've been able to open in person. I think part of it has to do is, we're just an undergraduate college, so we don't have, we don't have grad students who are also doing internships and a lot of things like that. And everybody is, if they're here, they're on campus, they are in dorms. And we're also in a very rural area, which can help, although that worries me, because there's a sense of it's not here and it's not going to ever come here. It is here. But we have, I think, about 400 students or so opted to study remotely, and the rest, so maybe 1,700 are on campus. They, had everybody do, faculty, staff, students take a COVID test before coming. They had a few that came back positive, so those students were isolated, and once they were symptom-free, came to campus. We decided to do wastewater testing, which was really ahead of the game. There's not many places that are doing that. And my understanding is it can catch the virus before it would even show up in any other kind of test and before it becomes contagious. So they've been doing that regularly to all the dorms. And then if they find a case, the dorm goes into quarantine, and then they individually test everybody. So they found, I think, 9 or 10 cases, but it has never spread more than 2 people, because they find that person and then they can isolate them. Everybody's wearing a mask in the practice rooms, in the classrooms, even outside. If you walk on campus, which is very spacious, everybody has their masks on. So that's been very comforting. I feel safe to teach here. I have a UV filter that's in my office, and there's UV filters in all the practice rooms for our students. We have large HEPA filters in the classrooms. The caps at the classrooms are way below the safety requirement. And they've put a lot of the classrooms in big rooms, or we have outside tents and such. So
hold on, I'm taking notes here for the Hawaii Department of Education and the Hawaii local governments. This is very good information. We want to do this here. We want to be open here. So
it's a model. It sounds like.
Incredible. In a recent podcast, we were speaking with a lot of great composers who work in the University of Hawaii system. And I think predominantly or entirely they're teaching remotely. And what they were saying, their point of view about that was that it took them considerably longer to prepare the lessons in terms of creating slides and listenable material. And they found it to be significantly more challenging to engage with their students. So all those things I can imagine being the case. So thankfully you are able to teach in person. Was there ever a time when you were teaching remotely throughout the spring or summer?
Sure. Yeah. We shut down at our spring breaks. The last 7 weeks of classes were completely remote and online. And I think like every university, we just threw stuff together and kind of limped our way through. But we had a lot of professional development over the summer that faculty and staff were encouraged to take. And we were actually compensated for it, which was really wonderful and very lucky.
Yeah.
And so it ended up with a faculty that really came on board for the fall semester, extremely prepared. And even though we are in person, we're all doing hybrid because in each class I have some students that have opted to teach from home or to learn from home, and they were given that option, no questions asked. So I have some students who are online so that I have to make sure the class is Zoomable and set up the mics and the cameras and everything. And I also have, a lot of lectures that I do ahead of time and record and put up. But, I can always use them again in future semesters. So it's a lot of work in the beginning, but I think it's going to be helpful later on. They've also been very accommodating of faculty, because I'm trying to teach my child at home. And if I need to be home to teach her and I need to occasionally go and do an online teaching, I'm allowed to do that, which I'm extremely thankful for.
So what are your tips for maintaining engagement with your students, either when you're teaching remotely or when they have to learn remotely?
I don't know if I have any tips. All I can say is I'm extremely lucky here. I mean, I was looking late last night. I was going around on the web and talking about, how professors are opening their Zoom and seeing like 40 black squares and nobody turns on the camera. That does not happen in our students here. That does not happen. The students keep their cameras on, they're engaged. It's part of it's just we have a really wonderful sense of community here, especially within the music department. And the students have been really helpful with, the online instruction. So in that way, I'm extremely lucky. I don't ever have to look and see a blank screen or even, a few blank boxes. Everybody's got their camera on, they're tuned in, they're interacting, they're asking questions, they're commenting sometimes by chat, and it's So I don't know if I have tips other than to say I'm really lucky here and the kids are great. The atmosphere is really great.
So one tip is camera on for all you students out there.
Right.
We need to see you.
How granular can you get with an online piano lesson? Is it
so that has challenges because a lot of it depends on the equipment on the student's end. If they have a laptop that doesn't work well or something. I mean, Zoom with the original sound has been wonderful. I mean, that was a huge change. And now, students can do that on a tablet or a phone. But what I've done is when I have students that my more advanced students or ones that are polishing a piece, I found it was easier to tell them, okay, your lessons, if it's Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, I want you to record your piece at home, wherever you are, because that's usually better quality, and send it to me. And then we will both, at the beginning of your lesson, we'll both mute our mics and we'll go in and we'll listen, because, typically they would play for me at the beginning of the lesson. And then this adds another component where they're forced to listen to themselves, right? And that's a great way to learn when you're learning a piece, is to record yourself and listen. But it's hard to do that. And sometimes it's not the best feeling to do that. But it's forced these students, especially when they're preparing for a recital or a jury or something, to listen to themselves, and then they come back and say, oh yeah, I noticed I didn't do this, or I noticed this didn't make sense, or I noticed that so that actually was helpful. And I found that the Zoom teaching in the spring was actually I thought some of it went better than the typical in-person, and probably too because they just had more time, because they weren't going to all these extra events. They were stuck at home, so they had more time to practice. But a lot of my students, especially my private students, took off in the spring because they had more time to spend at the piano.
How many music students are there at your college?
I'm trying to think. We typically have anywhere from 25 to 32, 34 a year. So maybe 110 majors. I would 100, 110. It fluctuates. But we had a decent sized freshman class. We hit our enrollment, which we were really surprised about. So but I would say 100, 110 students over the 4 years.
Yeah. Well, can we, let's see, please speak first about postcards, two more works by Robert Helps that you've recorded in your 2 CD compilation of all of his piano works. You mentioned that they may not be published, and they're certainly not performed a lot.
I don't think they are. And when I was looking through, all of the materials, there was no mention of the postcards. I think they're the last works that he wrote. And I think I came across recordings of him playing, but there was no mention of it anywhere. And most of the people who knew him didn't know of these works as well. And I don't think they're published. So
there are two. One is San Francisco in the Fog, and the other is Friday Night in Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
So why don't we take a listen, Peter?
Okay.
That sounds great. There's actually quite a bit to unpack there for two short works. Were these dug out of one of the 60 or 70 boxes? Were they completed scores? Were they handwritten? What was the experience like discovering them?
If I remember right, I think these were set. I don't think they were handwritten. If I remember right, they were set. So it was a little bit easier to decipher. I mean, Helps's writing is very clean, but still, it's sometimes hard to. It's much easier, to read something that's not handwritten. But yeah, if I remember right, these were type set. Yeah.
The San Francisco in the Fog has a lot of nice polyrhythms and a lot of high register writing. And then in contrast, Friday Night in Greenwich Village is very rhythmic. It's almost kind of, you see sort of a fair or a circus or something along with that. It's a very even timed work. So in contrast, very different, but at the same time, both very, very American impressionist type of work and very evocative of the images, or of the scenes for which they're named, I think, too.
Yeah. And I think that the Greenwich Village one, he likes to write a lot of toccata kind of motion. And that's, there's one in retrospect that's very similar, that kind of, active, kind of very energetic, small 16th note.
It does. It keeps going. It keeps going very quickly. About what time period were these works written?
I think they were his last works. So early 2000s, probably. I can't remember. Yeah.
That's a lot more recently than I would have imagined, based on the style. When was Robert Helps? When did he kind of begin, and what was his life like as a composer?
Robert, do you want to talk about that?
Let's see.
I could just link the Wikipedia article if you want. I'm just curious how much.
Well, let's see. He wrote some massive works. His first symphony was 40 minutes or so. And then there was a second symphony that he wrote in Florida that had its premiere there, not, probably in the late 80s or 1980s. And then a number of chamber works, some of which I've heard him perform, the Fantasy for Violin Piano, and let's see, he straddled that composer pianist situation, perhaps unlike anyone, since, really powerful composer, but then, an interpreter without peer. So, this intertwining of his piano studies with Whiteside affecting his composition, and the composition studies with Sessions affecting his performance, made him really, quite special that way. But let's see, this rhythmically, you might say he never got very complex in terms of serializations of the rhythm, and yet he tackled works that did that and made some legendary performances of those. But in some ways, you could say he was more conservative as a composer, but not in pitches, though. And there seems to be something so impeccable about his pitch choices. You can anticipate the rhythms. He gets into a kind of groove with his rhythms, but you can't really anticipate the pitches except for the way he does them, the way his does. And to my knowledge, maybe you know better, Naomi, but he never really spoke about his approach to pitches in his music, of how he chooses them, strictly by ear, perhaps, strictly intuitively, as Sessions used to say, that's the ultimate arbiter, of course, in a composition, that the one has to just listen and make the ultimate choices. Wouldn't depend on a 12-tone roll that, or any other formula for pitches, but it would depend on one's ear. And the same is true of Whiteside, who said that the most important organ in our body for piano performance is the ear. And so the only direct experience, and we could play this one now as well, is hearing him perform for us piano students way back in the day. Maybe one of the first times he ever played for anyone, his homage to Fauré, and that led to the two other homages. So these are, as Naomi says, maybe his most broadcast music, because they're tonal. Certainly the homage to Fauré is tonal. But yeah, we listened, late Jim Carmichael, myself, maybe someone else, but listened to him play that for the first time. And there was a kind of a shock at its, overt tonality. But it just, in a sense, he was uncompromising. He was very honest as a composer, very uncompromising, but very honest. And there was always a clarity about his compositions, rhythmic clarity, metric clarity, clarity of voices, of structural voices. And so, but perhaps, again, as a kind of nostalgic moment, we could listen now to the homage to Fauré.
This is from your recording, Naomi, from the Robert Helps Complete Works is the version we're going to listen to. So let's check it out.
soon to be heard in a broadcast by Hawaii Public Radio. But so long as we've mentioned it, we should also hear in retrospect. We have other possibilities that we might be able to add, but certainly this is a 4-movement work. Is it something, it's one of your favorites, is that right?
Wait, which one are you?
In retrospect?
Does that have 5? I think doesn't it have 5?
Oh, it's 5 movements?
It's 5, including the prelude.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's
okay,
prelude,
okay, 5
dance,
movements.
song, pastoral, and toccata.
All right,
Yeah.
there it is.
5,
Okay, yeah.
So helps us kind of represents sort of this tonal counterculture of 20th and 21st century music.
Yeah, exactly. He did not align with the serialists, although he worked right alongside them. Many of his colleagues were that way, but he did not. He went his own separate way, and
But in terms of like Heinrich Schenker analysis, the tonality, would you think it would be, very phrase-like compositions? That's what it sounds like to me, is that everything always has a movement and a direction. I don't know if all of his work is particularly tonal. I'm not familiar with everything, but it does, cross a lot of lines in terms of styles of impressionistic composition, and also feels very global too, as though he can capture the essence of a place through that kind of music very effectively. Maybe that's the nostalgia I feel listening to it, because it's not often, excuse me, that there is new tonal music other than outside of film or television or something too, or, pop music, I guess. But in terms of the modern classical world, there's, quite a lack of tonal music. Everybody's pushing so hard against whatever boundaries they perceive that, we're focusing on noise and texture and, other qualities, extended techniques beyond any kind of traditional performance. And so I think he seems to capture a real moment in time is the feeling I get from some of this work that we've heard so far.
The homages, or certainly this foray homage, is even an aberration for him too. Wouldn't you say, Naomi? It's perhaps his most broadcast piece, but also somewhat out of the mainstream of his own creative output.
Yeah, and and he said that the tune had come. He was very sick, right, with the flu and a very high fever in Florida, and this tune just kept spinning in his head over and over again. He was sick, and he just got so annoyed he decided to write it down, and it ended up turning into this piece, and he just didn't know what to think of it himself. So, yeah, I think it's definitely an outlier. Yeah,
fever dreams and hallucinations.
Yep.
And the in retrospect set. A bit about that again.
It's 5 movements. It's kind of looking a little bit at like a Baroque suite, kind of. You got the toccata at the end. You have this aria kind of song. There's a prelude. I've always enjoyed it. It's just a very I find a very sweet, intimate piece. It's nothing very complicated. It's simple, and in that way, that's a wonderful thing. Not as in it's simple and therefore it's not good. There's simplicity which is really wonderful in it.
That sounds fantastic. Well, let's take a listen to In Retrospect, and we'll listen to each movement for the complete work.
Yes.
Fierce at the end, and then it just kind of lands. It just kind of lands in a very soft and elegant finale.
Mm-hmm.
That's very typical. Yeah. Almost all of his pieces just disappear.
Better to burn out than to fade away. I don't know. How does that go?
Yeah, and it's, I didn't know him, but everybody said he was, such a humble person. He never promoted himself. He was very, very shy. And to me, that seems to be his personality. He's not somebody that would end a concert with a big bang, but just kind of let it simmer out and walk off stage. To me, that seems very much like his personality. And almost all of his pieces end that way.
Yeah, and there is something, an aesthetic of space in a lot of his work too. When you were talking about his own performances, talking about how he would carry his lines a bit further in time and extend that, it seems like he also enjoyed the space between the notes, letting the resonances play out. And it's sort of the Japanese artistic aesthetic. Was that in any way a part of his influence?
I don't know if the Japanese aesthetic was, but I mean, definitely, and they often say that silence is more important than the sound, right, in music, and having that time, that sense of timing and knowing when you should go on and when you should let it linger is something that's, I think, very special.
Yes, in his teaching, he used to say, wait, just learn to wait, meaning, well, it's a double entendre, WEIGHT as well. That is, allow the heavier, larger levers to follow through, to not, anticipate that, or so to. But you also spoke about a project with the work of Vivian Fine. Has that gotten any further? Have you been in touch with her daughter, Peggy Karp?
Yeah, well, because originally I wanted to start recording some more of Vivian Fine's work and also look at some of her chamber music. And we were all pretty much set to go with that. And then COVID hit, and I think everybody just started to scramble. So no, I haven't gone further with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there is a piano trio, which I would love to do. Yeah.
As well as for us, you've recorded her 5 preludes and performed them in these recent or year ago recitals. Yeah. But you'd spoken about another complete piano works project of hers.
Maybe. Yeah. I've always liked her. Was it the arias and toccatas?
Mm-hmm.
It's which I would love to tackle next. Yeah. So.
Was there a recording of that, Robert? The recital?
Which
we haven't. Ebb and Flow Arts hasn't released it, has it?
The Naomi's?
Yeah.
That's for the HPR to broadcast.
Oh, so that has yet to be broadcast.
So, yeah.
And that's from the Atherton concert series. Good.
That's right. Yeah. So the recording was made of that. Okay, so what are your current plans and also for the future, projects for the future under these circumstances? And are you at all concerned about us as a culture forgetting what live performance was like? My contention is that after the book by Gore Vidal, The United States of Amnesia, and having had experiences here with various institutions, that we easily forget aspects, some of the most important, meaningful aspects of our culture. And a sign of the times is that live performance has been rendered the least essential and most dangerous activity in our society. That didn't have to be. If the culture had a different set of values, as with Susquehanna College, they clearly have put a priority on in-person learning and maintaining the quality of the education and keeping people healthy and so forth. So it can be done, but anyway, do you get any sense of that? And my sense is that, for example, perfectly, educated, intelligent, sensitive people tell me that they're seemingly satisfied with the Zoom nature of music performances these days. They feel like they probably understand it's a stopgap measure and all the rest, but for me, it's a too easy acceptance of that mode of music making.
Yeah. As far as plans for the future, to be honest, I try not to think about it too much because then it gets a little bit too depressing.
No. Understandable.
And I think when this all started, I don't think we thought that it would be continuing this way.
And it need not have, by the way.
No, I know. Yeah. And I think that's what's the most frustrating thing. I see colleagues in Europe who are going back to performing. I mean, even orchestras performing with less people, but actually, still being in halls and so on. I don't know if that will be able to happen here. I think, I guess there is a worry that people are getting comfortable with just sitting in their living room and tuning in to something. But I also, part of me is so thankful that, if this had happened 15 years before, we wouldn't be doing anything. I mean, we certainly wouldn't be doing this podcast, right? And we wouldn't have the ability to reach people with video. I mean, certainly you've got audio recordings, but so I'm thankful for that. But but I also think for those people who music was important before this, they go to. I mean, of course, they have, they may have lots of recordings and so on and listening as much as possible on the radio, but they go to live concerts because it's a very different feel. And they know that. And they want to have that direct communication that happens there and only there and can't happen over a screen. And I think for those people, I don't think, I don't even know if I can say when, if we get back to what we were doing, before this past spring, if we can return to that, I think those people will be back. And I think for those people, it is a good thing that we're able to do things online and try and have some kind of connection. And I know places that typically have concert series, and I'm not talking the ones that are open to the general public where it costs $250 a ticket, and you kind of wonder if the people going there really music appreciation or they just want to go and show that they're part of this upper society or whatever. I'm talking about, I'm talking about, the concerts that are for the community and for, for people who want to go because they want to see the performance, they want to hear the music, and that can be in smaller recital venues, even the bigger venues I think, when you get to these big venues, it's really only a small percentage of the public that are actually going there for the music. But for those people and for communities that typically have concert series, for smaller communities or in retirement centers, things like that, those people are starving for some kind of interaction and being able to hear and see live and be in the same room. And I don't think that's going to disappear. I think it's going to start, if it starts back, it's going to start back very slowly. And unfortunately, I think a lot of performers will, maybe not be there. I mean, you think of, the Met and all the big orchestras where that's their primary income, and they live in a city that's very expensive. Without that income, they can't be there. And you wonder about those big organizations. Can they start up again? I don't know. I don't really want to think about it.
No, it's a lot to rebuild. No doubt they will, because people are, of course, hungrier than ever right now for performance. And so rolling back in slowly, trying to figure out how to do it and hopefully to do it better than ever before. you're right. This technology, I mean, as tough as it is to limit our interaction to this kind of an interface, it is better than sending VHS tapes through the mail. So
Yeah.
But the larger organizations, they are, so burdened by heavy administration as well. And they have to be so 100% in compliance in terms of the venues that they can play at. They are some of the most restricted at this time too. So I think that you're absolutely right that it's going to take from the smaller ensembles, the chamber musicians, and people to start let's just try this. Let's just see if this will work. Inviting people over to hear a rehearsal is a brilliant way to initiate that process, and just to kind of keep the momentum going. As slow as it is, as small as the ball might be that's rolling, it is, I think, rolling in a positive direction for musicians, hopefully to start at a small scale and work our way back up again.
Yeah. We're not, this country is not Europe. We don't have the tradition. We don't have the support, the public support, the financial, the government support. And so we will, I think in this country, the big organizations are going to have their hands tied. They don't really have people to speak for them, a large population to speak for them. So I think it's going to take us longer in this country.
We need those, the Met corporate lobbyists, I guess, to get out there.
Yeah. But if if it's not something that the majority of the public see as a value, or I do think in Europe there's a higher percentage that people see it as a value. Here it's just entertainment.
Entertainment.
And you can find entertainment any other way, right? There's nothing special or particular about it. So I do think, unfortunately, it is going to take longer in this country, but hopefully it will. It'll come back.
Yeah. Well, our good friend Soren Oliver tells us horror stories about what's going on with the San Francisco Symphony. Apparently, they're offered 1/3 of their salaries this season. So Soren is looking to move. He also because of the fires.
Yeah.
And there are, Paul Marchetti, Peter, a percussionist on Maui who has worked with us over the years. He also thinks about moving to Europe.
That's perhaps. A surprise. Yeah, well, that would. Yeah. I mean, I'd say now's the time to make a big change. Unfortunately, but I would say everybody should just move to Hawaii. Let's get everybody out here. It's a great weather right now.
Yeah.
Spend some time outside. Let's retool.
Right. Maui, apparently, the health director here is modeling New Zealand in terms of attempting to eradicate or crush the virus. There was a report from a gentleman who moved from Amsterdam to Thailand in March because he didn't feel the Europeans were handling things very well with the virus. And in Thailand, he claims that a country of 65 million people, total deaths 59. And he attributes that to a more authoritarian approach from the top down. And also in China, that is, if the authorities say wear masks, then nobody's going to disobey that because the punishment is severe. He characterizes the United States and Europe as too libertarian in their approach, but
libertarian to a fault, I guess.
Yeah. But he anyway, he had these astounding facts. So the way the virus has been managed can make a big difference, apparently. And so, Naomi, we will include a work also by Ursula Mamlok that you've recorded. Maybe you could say a few words about that before we sign off.
Okay. Yeah, this is a work 2,000 notes. It is in 4 movements, and got the
Are
opportunity.
there exactly 2,000 notes, or what is that all about?
I think it's for the year 2000.
Oh, okay.
We'll count along.
Okay,
I'll keep a
continue.
running tally as we listen.
Count them. Maybe there are 2,000, which on the piano is not a lot of notes, really. I mean,
I guess it all depends.
yeah. So yeah, and we had the wonderful opportunity to work with her when I went over with Spectrum Concert in Berlin. We did a couple. We did a concert. We did the CD, but we also did a concert of her works. And I was able to spend a few times with her when she was still alive and play for her. And she also wrote us a quintet that we premiered, which was fun to work with her on. And, up until the last minute, she was, kind of changing the ending and basically then saying, do what you think, and basically improvise, a little bit at the ending. So that was an enjoyable experience. And I think this was for her 90th birthday, if I remember right, that we did this concert and this recording. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So what is it like to work with a composer like her who's overseeing the rehearsal process and guiding your choices and also making edits? Is it more exciting? Is it more dynamic, or is it more difficult as a performer?
It's always a great thing because, especially if you play a lot of dead people's works, right? I mean, that are 100 years gone, you can't, all you can do is guess, right?
Consult their ghosts.
And hopefully you have educated guesses, right? But it's really wonderful to work with a living composer. And I think the general thought is maybe that, the composer's going to tell you to do exactly this and exactly this and exactly this. And it's really wonderful to see, when you play for them, sometimes they'll say, I didn't think of it this way, or and they really take joy in hearing different people play it, as and Helps wrote this in a lot of his scores. He said, do what you think feels right or sounds right, and you can go listen to half a dozen recordings of him playing the same piece, and they're all over the place in terms of interpretation and timing and tempo, and I think most composers are that way. It's just like when you teach a music instrument. It's a two-way street. It's not just teacher to student, and I think a lot of times the teacher gets more from the student than the student does from the teacher. And I also think sometimes working with composers, it really is a two-way street, and that's really wonderfully interesting to see. It's very enlightening too.
That's something that we've talked about on the show before. For me personally, I feel like a composition, when it's finished, is merely a draft until it's in the hands of a performer. But I kind of thought I was alone in that. I kind of thought, I've made a million mistakes, but I'm not aware of it until I hear somebody else read through the work and interpret it. A composition is only half the work, because the rest of it is in the trust of a particular performer to find a way to recreate the feelings and also try to create, the mood and tie it all together in a way that's personal to them. A composer puts a lot of trust in the right performer to make that happen. When we spoke with the Hawaii Symphony concertmaster Iggy Jang recently, he and I did a work together about 15 years ago. And a lot of the things I didn't realize about how he would play informed choices I made to edit the composition, the day before it was being performed. So it was a great process. And I thought, maybe I was just inexperienced. I didn't know how this worked. So it's refreshing to hear that it can be an active process between composer and performer.
Yeah, I mean, if you compose, you're leaving it in the hands of people who are going to play it for better or worse, right?
Yeah. Well, let's check out the 2,000 notes. 2,000. I guess it's all about the emphasis on the right syllable there. The 2,000 notes for solo piano by Ursula Mamlock.
Well, yes, great. She lived in New York, didn't she? Yeah.
Yeah, she was in New York City. She fled Europe, World War II, and then decided to come back. And I think I believe her husband passed away, and then she moved back in her 80s to Berlin.
Yeah, because she was on New York Guild of Composers programs.
And I think she was on the faculty at Juilliard, or I can't remember where. I think it was Juilliard that she was on the faculty. Yeah.
Well, so just to say that the range of your repertoire is quite remarkable, from the classics through the neo-romantics and to serialism. With you managed to perform all with power and grace and deeply felt interpretation. So we're very grateful for all of that, Naomi, and it's so wonderful to spend time with you at this distance. Nevertheless, like you say, thanks to the miracle of Zoom, we can do it, and we will broadcast this soon. We'll send it to you, of course, for review before, and then post it as we have been doing on our website, on our Facebook page, through the email, and other possibilities that we're working on. So good luck for the rest of this semester, and hopefully we'll have you return live in person for more recital work here, and your trio as well will become once again active in concert making. Those Berlin performances, by the way, were the last that Taubes gave. Ours